up, guys? It's Gabi and Koyenov. Today we are joined with Moma, and in this video, we are going to discuss the long-awaited actual cultural breakdown of different Orthodox Jewish sects. Now, I'm actually super excited for this video, and I plan to do a lot. I think we need to start with a few disclaimers. First of all, as I stated in the last video, I do not want to put everyone in a box. Obviously, we are talking about cultures with deep and long history. Discussing them in a short video will obviously not do it a true sense of justice. What I hope to accomplish is giving you just a slight sense of kind of how the community operates, what the values are, and just what's important, just to give us a slight sense of flavor and whatnot. Also to say that I think these communities have much more in common than they do difference. Way more in common. The differences are honestly almost imperceptible when you're looking at it from a truly outside perspective. I think that at its core, these communities all truly believe that there's a deeper sense and purpose to life, that we are here for something more than just this material existence. And within the time that we've been given, we need to make something meaningful and valuable out of that time. So let's crack into it. I'm going to start with traditional Jews. It's important to say that there's a spectrum of religiosity within traditional Judaism. Some of them are very traditional about it in the sense that maybe they'll only do a Friday night meal, or they'll just go to shul, the synagogue, for the high holidays. And that will be their Judaism. And they don't necessarily feel that they need to work on that, and that's okay. It was the way that they were brought up, and that's how they feel. And on the other end of the spectrum, where they're totally super religious, they're keeping everything from Sabbath to kosher to all the stuff that you could possibly imagine. So my parents were fully observant on that right end of the spectrum that I just described. To be more specific, when I talk about traditional Judaism, I'm going to talk about Sephardi Judaism, and even more specific than that, Bukharian Judaism. Now, I grew up Bukharian, and that's why I'm going to stick on that specifically, because that's what I know most of. When you're talking about Sephardim, in America, there are many different types of Sephardi Jews. There's Persian, Syrian, Bukharian, Moroccan, Turkish, Egyptian. There's a whole list, and Sephardi is basically generally defined as North African, Middle Eastern, or Central Asian. And any Jew that comes from one of those countries are basically called Sephardi or Mizrahi Jews. So what it was like growing up Bukharian, it was awesome. And there is no other way to put it. Being Bukharian, it's like being part of a certain club almost. Like when I meet a Bukharian friend that I haven't seen in 10 years, it's, hey, what's up, bro? How you been? How's it going? How's your brother? How's your family? How's everything? And it's just warm. There's always like a hug. There's always a sense of brotherliness that exists. Typically nobody's getting into fights, obviously. But if you, in theory, were getting into a fight, that your friends have your back. You know what I mean? There's a sense of loyalty that exists within the community that just doesn't exist in the other Orthodox communities. It's just not the same at all. In many other communities, you hadn't seen a friend in 10 years. Oftentimes, you'll just walk by and not even say hi. Or if you do say hi, it's no hug, maybe a handshake, maybe not. There isn't that same level of, these are my brothers, these are my people, this is my community, and a sense of connectedness and togetherness that exists, not just in family, it's a whole community that feels very connected. Also, Bukharians and Sephardim in general typically are a lot more street smart. They're a lot more people oriented. There is a certain gut feeling that they are more in tune with. There's a certain cunningness and suspicion almost. And deductive reasoning. When things don't sit quite right, they pick up on that. Also, you could always just laugh with your Bukharian friends, your Sephardi friends, just a little bit harder, be a little bit more real with them, and keep it 100%. The values in the community are very family-oriented, and everyone basically knows everyone. And there's this network of Bukharian grandmas that, they'll try to set you up with girls and just all sorts of things, and everyone knows everything. It's very hard to totally be private within a Bukharian community and to totally be individualistic. It's a very kind of collective culture. I wouldn't go as far to say it's totally collective, but it's very intergenerational. When I grew up, our grandma lived with us, and that's a very common experience for a lot of Bukharians and Sephardim. And I think whether you're religious or not, Bukharians just click. There isn't really that kind of judgment in that religious way. And of course there are individuals that might be more judgmental and whatever, but like for instance, my cousins, a lot of them are just not religious, and I'm sure maybe they felt sense of judgment coming from me if like they don't keep kosher, and I wouldn't want to eat in their house because they don't keep kosher, and I would try to be very respectful about it, of course. I'm sure they felt some sense of judgment about that, but like typically it's very like I'm totally accepting of not religious people. When a lot of other communities, especially when they're super closed and tight-knit and they don't have exposure to not religious people, it could typically feel a little bit judgmental in those kinds of communities, and that's unfortunate, but that is often how it is. Also, an interesting thing, so about the Bukharian community, men typically are hustlers. I don't know why this is. There is a hustle culture. Sephardi men in general are more likely to work out. They're more likely to be hustlers and start businesses, even at young ages. Like they'll get jobs in camps when they're 14 in the summer and stuff like that to be able to make money. And in the other communities, it's not as common. Of course, you are going to have Ashkenazim and people going out to get jobs in the summer when they're 14, but it's way less common. By Bukharians, pretty much everyone at 14, you're not going to camp. You're not spending the summer doing nothing. You're getting a job and you're making money and you're working out with your friends. And there's just this idea of like really trying to get ahead in life that exists within the community, and I'm not fully sure why it exists specifically by Sephardim and not by the other communities, but that's kind of how it is. Women similarly, but they take on a lot of the household roles. They're basically second mothers. A lot of girls are expected to kind of take care of their younger siblings and to do some of the cooking and cleaning and things like that, and their mother really teaches them those kinds of things. It's very like encouraged for women to be very nurturing and motherly, and by men it's more like there is a push to be hustlers. So that's kind of how the community operates. I do know that there are some guys that this affects them negatively, where it's almost like toxic, where like they have to flex all the time or something like that, and it's just like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, that's not like the cool Bukharian guy that's just like flexing. It's usually like the guy, like, we kind of all like feel bad for him. Like, what does this guy have to prove? Like, he has a chip on his shoulder. Most of the time, I think, like, for me and my friends, it's always been like an extra motivation. Like, I work out every day, when basically I don't think any of my Ashkenaz friends work out every day. I got my master's relatively early, and I found a job relatively early, and a lot of my other Ashkenaz friends, they're a little bit more chill with it. And I do understand how that could put a pressure on a lot of people, and it affects them negatively in some ways, but I think overall it's a positive within the community, that the community tries to produce people that are productive and produce people that are successful. Also, I think like with regards to the work ethic, a lot of that comes from the parents. My parents came from a different country, and they came here and they worked extra hard. My mother was a nurse, my dad was an electrical engineer, and they just worked really hard to create a beautiful and good life in America. And that's something that a lot of the immigrants coming from wherever country they came from, they did work extra hard, and that work ethic definitely passed on to the children to some degree. And like, talking about my dad for a second, he is probably like one of the most consistent, calm people I know. Like, the world could literally be crumbling around him, and he'll just be like chilled, like humming, like doing whatever needs to be done, like singing a song while he's at it. And like that's basically my dad. He's been like that for his whole life, as long as I can remember. And he still is like that, and he has this very strong sense of responsibility that he if he feels like he needs to do something, he does it. And certainly I do feel like that has rubbed off on me to some degree. And my mom too, just insanely hardworking, having a full-time job while also basically taking care of us and maintaining the house and whatnot. Just to talk briefly about how people in this community date, typically how traditional Sephardim will date, it will depend on how religious they are. If they are not so religious, often you'll meet a girl in college or whatever, from around, and you'll meet her. And typically, you wouldn't actually do boyfriend and girlfriend for a long period of time. It's not so secular in that, like, we'll get married when we're 30, but be boyfriend and girlfriend for like 10 years. Even not religious Bukharians and Sephardim will get married anywhere between 18 at the earliest to like 25, is already kind of late in many of these circles. They try to get married young, and they get married within their community. There are, of course, many exceptions. I have friends that have not married Bukharian, but typically Bukharians want to marry Bukharian, Persian want to marry Persian, and Syrian want to marry Syrian. That is kind of how the community is. And of course, there are people that branch out. That, I have friends that have married Persians and Syrians and things of that nature, but typically people do like staying within their own community, and that's pretty normal. And then of course there's like our grandma set us up, or my cousin, or whatever, my neighbor set us up, something like that, friend of a friend. A lot of like blind dating through like knowing someone. So that kind of setup is very common as well. So another point, this is going to make more sense when we contrast it to Yeshivish Judaism and to Hasidus. Is that traditional people don't necessarily feel like they have a specific rabbi. Like, of course, they go to synagogue and they'll have a rabbi there, and, they'll listen to what the rabbi says and teach them halacha, but they could just as easily move to another shul and become part of that shul. They don't necessarily feel like, this is my rabbi, this is the rabbi that I'm learning from, that I'm following. It's more just like a rabbi is religious authority, and it's interchangeable. You could have any rabbi in theory, and that doesn't mean that they're like not going to prefer certain rabbis over others, but just like that mindset. And we'll see like how that's actually a big difference when we compare it to more yeshivish circles. So I think that some of the challenges within a more traditional community is that the community is dissolving, and it's kind of typical. The community has brought in their values from another country where such a culture was possible and maintained, and in America there's just a lot of assimilation. There's a lot of Westernism, and it's hard to kind of keep the community with its values the way it is. And on top of that, there is a degree of a cultural barrier where the kids growing up in the generation don't see eye to eye with their parents that have a totally different set of values coming from a different world, basically. So that of course, is a challenge within the community, and the community basically dissolves. People becoming more secular on the less religious end, and people becoming more religious on the more right end, and they're joining other communities, like a more yeshivish community, in some cases Hasidus, and modern Orthodox community. And I think, of course, some of the pros are, it's such a beautiful culture. There is song, there's dance, there's food that's delicious, and just like clothes, and the way the community is caring about each other and has each other's backs in such a strong and meaningful way, that it's awesome growing up there. And even people that are not religious at all within the community love being a part of the community, and that was the sentiment that I picked up as I went around talking to some friends that I know and just people in the community. And it's pretty awesome growing up Bukharian. You really feel like you are a part of something. The community very much watches after its own. When we hear a tragedy within the Bukharian community, everyone feels that, and we care deeply. So that's a beautiful thing about being a part of the community also. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Please leave comments. I'm very curious to hear if you felt that I did this community justice. A lot of this was just from my own experience growing up Sephardi, and I'm very excited to share this. I've already filmed the episode I want to do on yeshivish culture, and I'm very excited to put that one out. It just needs some editing, so hopefully I could actually put it up by the end of this week. Please leave your comments if you have questions, and whatever other videos I'm going to do is on modern Orthodoxy and on Hasidus. And for these, I don't think they're going to be as informed, because I am not modern Orthodox or am I Hasidish. It's just based on life experience and talking with friends. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed.